Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into the Positive Head podcast, where you can always count on hearing fascinating discussions and interviews with the best and brightest consciousness change makers that are out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. And if you enjoy the Positive Head podcast, of course, you can always tune in each week at positivehead.com, where we actually have a bunch of other really cool new things for you to check out. But as far as the podcast goes, if you have iTunes, we would love you forever if you also subscribe to the show there. In the podcast world, subscribers and good reviews on iTunes really are the holy grail. The more subscribers and good reviews you get, the more exposure you get. So if you love the show, or even just like it a little bit, please subscribe and give us a good review on iTunes. I assure you the support will be greatly appreciated, and I'm confident the good karma gods will rain blessings down upon thee for doing so. All right, all you positive heads out there, on this week's podcast, it is a very special one for me indeed. I am absolutely thrilled to have one of the founding board members of BlackRock City LLC here to talk with me. Now, in case you haven't figured it out already by the name BlackRock City, this is the organization that produces what many people, including myself, consider to be one of the most transformative events to ever grace the surface of our planet. You guessed it, I'm talking about none other than Burning Man. And on this episode, I will be speaking with Marian Goodell, who, in addition to being a founding board member, is also the current CEO of the Burning Man organization. So she'll be here with me to discuss all things Burning Man. And if I sound like I'm smiling from ear to ear during this podcast, well, that's because I am. If you know me at all, you know I've been a huge fan of, BlackRock City ever since I first set foot there for the first time back in 2005. But before I open up Pandora's box with Marian to pick her brilliant brain regarding all things Burning Man, I just want to point out something that many of my listeners out there, including many longtime burners, probably don't know. As of last year, there was a very positive structural change within the Burning Man organization, where BlackRock City LLC is now fully owned by the Burning Man Project, which is a nonprofit public benefit organization. So what does this mean exactly? Well, it means that you can donate to the Burning Man Project and get a tax write-off for your donation. This is a big step toward the Burning Man's organization's ultimate plan to spread the Burning Man experience beyond BlackRock City, Nevada for just 1 week every year. By allowing people to easily donate via their website, it opens up the potential for much more funding to flow into the organization, and those resources can then be used to help facilitate things like regional burns around the world. And of course, regionals themselves are still in their infancy stage, but are already starting to have an impact, helping to spread the Burning Man principles and ethos to every corner of the planet. At Burning Man headquarters, they often mention that they're only 25 years into a 100-year plan to spread the amazing 10 core Burning Man principles to as many people around the world as possible. And, if you've ever been to Burning Man, you've seen firsthand how these 10 principles truly do help to bring out the best in humanity. The synergy of the principles really creates an unparalleled sense of community without boundaries, without prejudice, that's rooted in non-judgment and unconditional love. And, God knows the world needs much more of this right now if we're going to survive as a species through this current phase of our evolution. So I know there are a lot of great organizations out there that you could donate to. I personally truly believe the Burning Man Project is one of the best organizations you could ever donate your hard-earned money to if you want to help create lasting change in the world. So I encourage anyone listening to this podcast, go over to donate.burningman.org and donate. Especially if you're a current or past burner, remember gifting is one of the 10 core principles, and donating, you're ultimately going to help to bring the Burning Man experience to someone out there who probably desperately needs it. I did this myself for the very first time last year. Actually, it was highly rewarding. So once again, the web address is donate.burningman.org. Head over there, donate what you can, then just write it off on your taxes. Okay, I feel much better now that I got that off my chest. So in this podcast, we're going to be focusing quite a bit on answering questions that relate to the existing burner community. However, I'd also like to give our listeners who aren't familiar with the event a little insight into what the heck we're talking about, what the event is like. You might even want to pause this podcast, go check out a few videos of Burning Man online, just so you can get a feel for the scope and magnitude of this spectacular, one-of-a-kind event. Without actually seeing it with your own eyes, it's sort of hard for the average person to imagine, living in this magical temporary city built in the middle of nowhere for a week. That being said, being the ambitious sort that I am, before I get into some juicy discussion with Marian, I'll take a quick stab at explaining an event that many say is unexplainable. So the city where Burning Man is built is called Black Rock City, as you've heard, and it has interactive art around every turn. For example, when walking around the city, you might see a statue of a giant woman, 4 stories tall, that is gracefully dancing as she appears to be emerging up out of the ground. Then, of course, there's over 60,000 citizens within the city for the week, many of which are in some of the most fantastical and creative costumes you could ever imagine. I mean, if you were the weird kid in school, you're definitely not the weirdest person in Black Rock City. And ironically, the only time you may actually feel weird is if you're wearing your normal everyday clothes. Then, of course, you also have art cars, or mutant vehicles, as they are so affectionately referred to as the main mode of motorized transport around the city. Literally hundreds of vehicles, buzzing around day and night, all of which are magically mutated in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps you'll see, the giant steampunk octopus that has flames shooting out of its tentacles with eyes popping out back and forth as it, swims around town. Or, a giant boombox the size of a Volkswagen may just cruise by, blaring some EDM. Maybe you'll be fortunate enough to hitch a ride on the back of a giant dragon making its way across the city. I mean, one thing you won't see is Mom's minivan. Now, of course, smack dab in the middle of the event, you have the ginormous wooden man that is burnt to the ground in a fiery spectacle as the crescendo of the week-long event on Saturday night. Now, that by no means explains all elements of Burning Man, but hopefully that gives you a little glimpse of what we're going to be talking about during this episode. And by the end of the podcast, you might have a few more tidbits that help paint a very rough sketch, picture of what the Burning Man experience is actually like. But ultimately, you just got to attend to fully understand. And now I defer to you, Marian. Hello, and welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and I'll jump right in. And in this podcast, we're going to focus primarily on answering questions that relate to the existing burner community. However, for my listeners who aren't really that familiar with the event, can you give the best possible Marian description of an event that is considered by most to be indescribable?
Oh gosh. Well, it's I consider it an exercise in temporary community where we encourage people to engage in radical self-reliance and radical self-expression, but to do that in the context of working with others. So that looks like civic responsibility and communal effort. And along the way, we expect people to leave no trace because there are no trash cans at Burning Man, and so you need to take everything away that you brought with it. And it's a place where it's a very immediate experience, and the way that people really connect is through gifting. So it's not like any normal festival. We don't even call it a festival.
Right. Now, on the website homepage is the definition of a burner, and it says a citizen of the worldview that is Burning Man may be encountered everywhere. What is that worldview? And maybe you could touch on that and a few of the 10 principles.
Well, I think the worldview of Burning Man really is it can be very personal for people. It really isn't something that's prescribed or forced.
Right.
There is the 10 guiding principles that I think if one gets exposed to them or has experience to them, it becomes sort of easy to look at them and adopt them. Typically, when all 10 of them are together, you'll find yourself in a Burning Man type experience.
Right.
And those include the things I was just mentioning, like gifting and leave no trace, but also radical self-expression and radical self-reliance.
Right.
And participation, immediacy, those are part of the ways in which we sort of can find that we're in a Burning Man experience, and then communal effort and civic responsibility. All of those, when you wrap them together, bring about this sense of connection with other people, and the way that you communicate changes.
Right. Very nice. Very nice. Now, each year there's a different theme as well. And this year it is Carnival of Mirrors, correct?
Yes.
What is the concept behind, having a theme in general and, of course, this year being Carnival of Mirrors? Can you speak a little bit on that?
Well, the themes are what we use in Black Rock City, which is, of course, one of the versions of Burning Man. And so annually, the Black Rock City has a theme. That theme gives people an opportunity to focus on something and aim for something. It's different every year. This year, Carnival of Mirrors is about the self and the reflection and taking a look at our times, and how we engage with it. It's kind of a fun theme, but it's kind of a serious theme. The masks of the self.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned Burning Man is not a festival. It's a catalyst for creative culture in the world, is something that I saw there on the site. What is the difference between Burning Man and a typical festival?
Yeah, well, you're quoting a tagline on a website. Everybody's always looking for 10 words or less, so that's the one that they have the website.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It doesn't always fit, but it fits well enough. A festival for many people is a place where you can sort of celebrate with other people. I think the old term of that would be definitely a gathering place amongst communities. But the word now sort of means stages and food vendors, and having things your comforts are more taken care of. We're definitely not at all interested in providing a typical festival atmosphere. We're definitely interested in providing a environment where people have a sense of themselves amongst others. And that's not like a typical festival.
Definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah. For those of you who haven't been to Burning Man or don't know much of it, it's in the middle of the desert in Nevada, and it's radical self-reliance, as Marian mentioned a moment ago. So you bring everything with you. There's nothing there except, I think, ice and coffee, right, that can be purchased. Right. So if you come
Normal festivals, you have trash cans, and we don't have trash cans.
Right.
We don't sell any water now, and many of the festivals actually give free water. So what's coming up for people at Burning Man is completely different, and that's why we really don't want to use the word festival, so that people don't expect it to be the same, and that they ask themselves, well, what is it I'm going there for?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what's so amazing about it is the fact that you have, 60, 70,000 people in the middle of the desert with no trash cans, and there's not, you don't see any trash laying around. It really is. I've been to festivals, a tenth of that size, and trash everywhere with cans, sitting next to the cans. So it really is.
It's about setting expectations too. In that case, we're really proud of that fact. If there was one trash can, then everybody would put their trash down by it. And I remind people that in their own camps, particularly if they have a public area, that they shouldn't put a trash can, even if it's for the campmates. They should hide their trash cans, because we don't want people to get lazy. I've gotten to the point now, when I carry a backpack, if I have a can or a cup, I put it back in my backpack. I don't go to somebody's camp and say, oh, where's your trash? The goal is, you're conscious about what you're bringing to it. And that's a really big one. That's one that's easy to carry back into your normal life. I think once you go to Burning Man and you experience no trash cans, you find yourself, every little wrapper that you take off of something, you wonder where it's going to go after it leaves your hands.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely would feel a lot stranger throwing it on the ground.
Right. People carry their little tins for their cigarettes with them. It's really kind of amazing. And the organization does not pay anybody to keep the grounds clean whatsoever. When the event is done, we do have a crew that begin to remove all the large items off the surface, and then we move towards what's smaller. But during the event, there's not any individual that is told, either volunteer or paid, to do cleanup. That's expected of the participants.
Yeah, right. So that gives a little taste for those of you who aren't familiar with the event. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and kind of jump into some of the obstacles and so forth that obviously for you guys to create this amazing container, it's one of the biggest cities in the state of Nevada for that week, correct? Like the third or fourth biggest city. Am I saying that right?
Sure. I think some people consider it like, I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that. Yeah, we're 70,000 people, so that's not small.
No, that's not small. So if you can imagine creating something from nothing for a week, that operates as smoothly as Burning Man does, there's been a lot of work and blood, sweat, and tears that have been, sacrificed to get there. And the first burn was in 1986 in San Francisco, and then moved to the desert. And so what I would like to do is just cover a little bit of some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome. And of course, what are some of the current things that are concerns among the Burning Man community? Of course, there's been a lot of debate over the last few years about the plug and play camps and, what some refer to as Billionaires Row, where you have more and more of these very wealthy, burners coming in and they have everything set up for them. For them, many are saying that they violate the Burning Man principles of radical inclusion and radical self-reliance and participation. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you left me with a lot of questions there. First of all, you asked about some of the challenges that we face in doing Burning Man. The challenges are pretty wide and they vary. Some of the challenges are to actually explain what Burning Man is out in the world. And my first couple of years of actually being part of the organization, certainly 96, 97, 98, when we weren't as well known, we spent a lot of time trying to explain to people what we were and who we were. Yeah. Then the next sort of set of work we ended up doing was government relations and really helping counties and local municipalities and then even the feds, because we're on federal government land, really explain who we are and give people an idea that there's a real organization behind it, and that the intention of the participants is very celebratory and is not really intended to break rules or break laws, that we're really gathering to enjoy ourselves, and that it's an experiment in temporary community. That's been the bulk of our efforts over the years. And then the other challenge we certainly have would be, part of what you're referencing. The challenge is to do the storytelling around the intention for the culture and the results that you will see with the 10 principles in place. And there is an ongoing dialogue really with the community and the outside world on the values that are produced out of Burning Man. And you're making a reference to the change in the types of people that come to Burning Man. Yeah. So for quite some time, I've been attending since 1995, and the tech community started showing up. And previous to that, the artists said, well, they were artists and they weren't techies. And why were the techies here? And then the techies and the artists start producing their art and their uniqueness. And then people were coming from different parts of the country. And then we saw those with money being able to come to Burning Man. And I think it's not fair for people to really make assumptions that because you have money, that doesn't mean that you're participating. It's a really unfair assumption to be making. There is a conversation around, though, what you do if you have a nice camp and whether the environment and arrangements in your camp actually allow for people to be getting the proper experience. That's the question. Is the camp and the people in the camp, are they engaging at a level that really brings about Burning Man culture?
Right. You had a issue that really heated up and got a lot of press this past year after I think it was someone who was actually a paid worker at one of the high-end exclusive camps, wrote an essay on Facebook about her negative experience working for the camp. And in the article I read, Burning Man founder Larry Harvey was quoted as saying, it would be a shame to waste a good crisis. So, I mean, have you guys been able to take this quote unquote, crisis and learn and adapt to prevent sort of a repeat experience in that particular instance?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, pretty much everything that happens at Burning Man is an organic evolution. And sometimes we're very aware of the next problem or crisis, but we're in a position of making a decision and putting it in place in order to reveal what the situation is. And we did that in 2012 when we used a ticket model that looked like a lottery. We were aware that we were reaching a capacity, but if we had implemented the programs and the processes we have right now, people would have screamed. So we implemented the one that was definitely not going to work, but it was the only one that was possible in a logical chain of events. We have watched the change in the type of people that come to Burning Man. I don't want to use the word demographic, but it is a demographic. And we're not going to get in front of certain things and force issues. We are going to nurture the process so that we're all going to get the best results. Burning Man is, again, an experiment in temporary community, and we're the stewards for that process.
Absolutely.
So, of course, there's many lessons learned from that crisis, and there are different things being implemented this year. We are managing the process that we have for outside vendors, which we call outside services. Those are the different types of services that are necessary for a large camp to survive. That includes special, sometimes toilet pumping, it means food, it means electricity. So if we can be aware of who is coming and going to do those services, that tends to lead us right to camps that have more resources than a normal camp. And we're doing other things to facilitate the improvement of the performance of those camps, including placement. We didn't place and won't be placing any camps that aren't expressing and exhibiting their productivity as participants.
Right. Now, is it something that is from, your perspective, if one of these large camps has paid workers, is that something that is, okay from, the Burning Man organization's perspective, or is that something that, it shouldn't be done? I
don't quite understand why there's such an outcry with people being paid in a camp. Again, it's about what the results are from the camp. It wouldn't be possible for my camp to exist without people that are paid to help put up the shade structure. I'm not physically able to support and build a camp myself. And most of the people in my camp actually are running the Burning Man event. So we rely on other people who have taken time away from their other jobs to come together to form the DPW. So the DPW are actually building the majority of the infrastructure for the organization. It should be seen, though, that a camp that's working together, whether someone's paid or not, the membership in the camp should actually feel more like a group and like a team, like a family, like a camp, really, than those that are staff versus guests. That's the format that isn't productive. It can't be an us and them sort of thing.
It makes total sense. It costs a lot to do all the things that are being done out there. So it's kind of like drawing imaginary lines in the sand saying, okay, you can spend money here, but you can't spend money there. It's,
right. Right. It really is. I mean, it's a really interesting dialogue about where does money fit into the process, and then to understand that Burning Man, the culture that is Burning Man, can really flourish with the best use of money, whether it's to the nonprofit, whether it's to build large pieces of art, whether it's to help fund the temple. whether it's to build very beautiful interactive art cars or bring musicians to your camp. What I think we're trying to get people to do is to reflect on what it means to be part of the community and where does your membership fit in. So if you're paid to help set up a camp, or maybe you're paid to help maintain the plumbing because you know plumbing, and you've stepped
Right.
away from your plumbing job and you have to set up the camp and you're helping set up the kitchen and you're breaking it down, and your camp says, hey, you know, our camp fees enable us to give you $2,000 because you stepped away from your job. You've got your own business.
Right.
That's
Right.
not even weeks. That's not enough to really compensate you, but we recognize that your services are valuable, and we want to make sure that you have some. But that person should still sit at the same dinner table with other people. That person shouldn't be considered staff versus the guests. That's where it gets messy. That's where
That's a distinction.
that's a distinction. And that's where the girl didn't feel like she was being treated right. It wasn't just about money, it was really about treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's easy to kind of assume that sort of thing might go on, especially if you're dealing with some very wealthy founder of a particular theme camp. And, then you have one person coming forward and saying that. And of course, that then snowballs into, okay, this is the way it is with all these camps that are sort of elaborate, and there's someone with a lot of money somehow behind it. They're all treating their people as slaves or what have you. And it gets blown up into this big thing. So I can see.
Well, yeah, one thing that people should think about that I think is pretty interesting, and you wouldn't know unless you're sort of in the middle of it, and then people, I think, will come to realize it over the next couple of years. It really is an organic process. And so are the lessons that camp leadership have over this. So I do, and I'm familiar with some of the leaders in the camps. And camp leadership comes in a couple of different forms. My theories are that sometimes you have a creative genius that has an idea for a type of camp. Sometimes you have a funder that helped found the camp. And sometimes you have an administrator that really is good at logistics and helps run the camp. And those three different types of things are rarely all one person, but sometimes they are. It's typically maybe three different people. Sometimes it's two with the qualities. And from my relationship with different people, what they're saying is they may have been generous the first time and had a large amount of money that they wanted to generously donate into their camp so that their friends could come and bring a significant other or two or three friends. But it's pretty typical that without the right kind of acculturation and engagement, that the folks in the camp start demanding and requiring and requesting different services or needs, or to have their bike fixed. And the leader of the camp finds themselves a little frustrated that what they first experienced or what they wanted from people wasn't happening naturally. So they spend the second year trying to figure out how to encourage people to be more self-reliant. And they might find an experienced burner to help them lead the camp. They might contact the organization or the theme camps and interact with other theme camps or the placement department and ask for advice. Our placement folks have a couple of open roundtables each year where they do Q&As and give people some tips and hints to be a successful camp. And then the third year, and this is what I've seen for a number of different groups, they choose more carefully who they invite into their camp and may ask for a nominal donation that really has the friends understand that they're contributing and that it's not just a free ride. And then I know of several camps where the leaders put the so-called guests through some sort of process to really get them to engage, whether they do a kitchen shift or they help line up the bikes or they run talks or they maybe get involved in the logistics of people coming and going. But this is a real sort of cycle that I've seen. I haven't yet seen a camp that really can maintain the same kind of the generosity and also have really productive results by those that are participating in it.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. So
Yeah.
now, from my perspective and others I've talked to, a few years ago, the police presence seemed to suddenly increase and get more aggressive. And now it seems to have really evened out and law enforcement seems a bit mellower. Can we expect it to stay this way in the future?
Well, I think law enforcement is a direct response to a number of factors. One would be certainly that the law enforcement officers are accustomed to what's really happening at Burning Man, and we've certainly been doing our part in trying to educate the participants about the expectations for law enforcement, and those are pretty important aspects. When things get over a little overreaching, you certainly find that the citations that happen will maybe the type of citations get changed in the process afterwards. So we try to keep an eye on that and do our part with government relations and have a fairly engaging conversation about what really is real. Last year, 2 years ago, participants were ticketed quite a bit for coming onto the playa with their bicycles obscuring the license plates of cars. That seemed a bit much.
Right.
And most of those citations were changed after the fact. And that's an indication that the citations were probably not really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we'll see a fairly fair engagement with law enforcement this year. And I would certainly hope it would stay like that working into the future.
Yeah, and I think it's, as we've discussed, it's really a city. It's an operating city. So if someone has the idea that they can just, start smoking a joint in front of a law enforcement, that's probably not a good idea. So
It's 8 days. It's not like your typical festival, which is 2 or 3 days, and everybody sort of lights up a joint and watches a band, and that stuff is done discreetly. And law enforcement officers have a different level of engagement at your typical festival, either your day festival or even your 3 or 4 night festival. We're really partners with law enforcement. We have very few crimes against persons at Burning Man. And I believe partly that's the nature of the individuals. And I also think that that's the nature of the expectations we've placed for people to be in a large civilized environment and to be looking out for each other. People get a little relaxed, and yes, they'll be standing right near a law enforcement officer and light up a joint. And the law enforcement officer really has no choice but to
right.
turn to the person. Typically, they'll ask them to put it out and they'll take it away. And if the person gets belligerent and then they go through their bag or their backpack, that's when you might see a citation. And that's why I usually try to really respect the fact that law enforcement is there and not sort of flaunt anything in front of them, particularly pot.
Right. Now, this year, there has been concerns. It seems like the community always finds something to be concerned about, right? And this year, there's been concerns about, electronic dance music somehow being marginalized or banned due to, I guess, there's a new deep playa music zone for mutant vehicles that play loud music. You also had, of course, one of the longtime sound camps not getting placement, Opulent Temple, and then of course you guys putting out a request to theme camps and mutant vehicles that feature music not to announce headliners. Can you want to take a moment and kind of clear the air on the idea that Burning Man is in some way against EDM?
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about. There's actually 4 things to go over. One is that the Danstronauts were not invited back this year.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That one, they were given warning. They were given warning as far back as 2013. And their primary reason for not having them back for 2015 was they were told to take a year off. They had violated enough of what had been requested of them that it was time that they take a year off. And we really have to be able to enforce our rules with the cars and the camps. And sometimes that means if you don't take responsibility for your own behavior, then you need to take the consequences. And we have a right to do that. And that's what we expect from other people, is to follow the rules. If we didn't enforce them, other people would take advantage of them. Opulent
Absolutely.
Temple chose not to apply as a music camp. I'm friends with Sid Griss, and he definitely made it very clear to me that they did apply, but they did not apply as a music camp. I did see their application as I saw other applications, and they had no specific interactivity for their camp in their initial application. They were suggesting that their goal was to have a mobile interactivity, but they wanted to have 100 of their campmates a given placement. And again, that just seems unfair to a camp that might
Right.
have any number of people asking for placement and having more interaction than that, but still not maybe enough to be interactive by most
Mhm.
standards. So the placement folks this year, so that's a placement issue, not a music issue. The placement folks this year did not place 105 camps, and that's not insignificant. That means a number of groups of people that may have come before or may have not, that are organizing themselves, won't get placement ahead of time. And the reasons for that are usually a combination of things, but primarily related to interactivity. You need to be interactive to be given placement. That's the whole point of placement.
Right.
So those two situations were really related to making the bar, reaching the bar, and or following the rules. In the case of the Dance-or-Nots, the you mentioned the music zone.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So this is an interesting one. This is a year of trying out a new idea. This is why we're organic. The There's been feedback from different quarters, and often it's the quarters that are going to be the quietest because they come and they give us the feedback. And this has been feedback off and on for a couple of years. And the feedback has been related to the groups that may circle their wagons and play music, in some cases, sit in one spot for 12 hours, and that's too long in the open playa. So that's the primary issue. If you're going to sit in one spot and turn your sound in any direction, including back towards the camp, and it disrupts those in the city, that's just not acceptable.
Right.
There is a boundary that the sound cars are told about, and they're also told that they need to turn their speakers out into the open playa. Last year, more than one occasion, and I'm one of the people that was awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning by the sound of thumping music. And when I got into my cart and went out, I found the car was facing its speakers towards camp, and it was past the man, and it
Wow.
woke me. And I'm telling you,
Wow.
my trailer was vibrating. And I wasn't the only person. Several of us came out of our trailers shocked and couldn't understand. I've been doing this for 19 years.
Yeah.
So we went to the ranger station, and it was an art car. It was a loud art car that wasn't following the rules. So the goal with this is actually to make the spot official for some of the cars that want to sit still for more than 3 hours. Now, if a car wants to sit in a group for 3 hours, that spot does not apply. They can sit for 3 hours, and then when they're done with their music, then they can move on. It really is not about the music, it's about the movement and the location. And the purpose
Right.
of the art cars are to move. Art cars are not stages that go and set up for 12 hours. And everything's been dangerously close to that. And we'd
Yeah.
like to just see if there's a way to reach an agreement about where you put yourself, if it's near art, where the toilets are, so that there's not a lot of human refuse. One of the biggest
Right.
problems that you can even ask the folks with Robot Heart that they find, people can't find their bikes, they can't find their backpacks, and they use the playa as a toilet.
Right.
And that's not
Yeah.
Robot Heart's fault, that's the participants' fault.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that the participants are going to take this as an opportunity to use the location that's been designated for the long-term dancing beyond 3 or 4 hours, and there'll be toilets, and it's a location that if you leave your bike, you'll know where that spot is, you can go back to. And that's the primary purpose for that spot.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I don't see once someone actually understands the logic behind it, and a lot of times with these sorts of issues, it is a lack of understanding, right? I mean, you're trying to create a designated area for people who want to, have those deep playa experiences and loud music, at all hours, blasting. And of course, having a place to go find your bike again and know where it's at and to actually be able to use the toilet when you're that far out. These are good things. So I think it's just important to clarify.
Out there for sure. That's been one of the plans, and we don't really want to have it too close because of the sound issue, but we also don't want to see little blue toilets and a little ring. So they chose the location while talking with Robot Heart. The organization originally had a different location and actually responded directly to Robot Heart's request for it to be moved, and it was moved. It's supposedly big enough for more than one group to be there. But we'll see. I think that this is also an opportunity for the art cars that want to sit still for that length of time to actually coordinate with each other. But I have found that it's primarily Robot Heart that enjoys the long-term, sitting still. And so we'll see. We have made no commitment to do it beyond this year. Let's see which problems we solve and which new ones come up, and take a look at it again for 2016.
Makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, there's always a lot of grumbling about the time it takes to enter and exit Black Rock City. Is there any chances of this process being improved upon?
Well, the grumblings that we got last year weren't as much about the line to get through the gate, but it was about will call. Mm-hmm. The line to get through the gate has remained somewhat the same between 3 to 4 hours for the last couple of years. And so the gate staff aim for that. That seems to be, by most of our polling and our own experiences, at a 3 to 4 hour wait to get to the gate. It is probably tolerable. It's when it reaches 6 or more that we find that there's a lot of restlessness, and that we don't really think that 6 is an acceptable wait time. And last year, when it was compounded on top of problems with the will call process in the box office, that meant
rain.
And it rained. And the rain. And the rain was its own situation.
Yeah, I can't do anything about that.
I know. It was crazy. People waited 16 to 24 hours to get into Burning Man.
Wow.
It's a fact of nature and a fact of life. It's been drizzling up there early this year. It's been drizzling during the setup that they were. Today is the day that they're going to put up the fence, and they've had rain during the survey. So there's a good chance that we'll see that again. People should just be prepared for that possibility.
Bring your rain boots.
Well, we've done a lot of work with the will call folks. Took a real hard look at what was their responsibility, and we made more will call or send it home available for international folks. That was pretty significant. They could pay to have guaranteed delivery overseas, which we hadn't done before. And we have more staff and we have more windows, but that typically isn't the only solution. We needed to actually make sure things were sent out. So our mailing, we waited until after the Oh My God sale. I believe that most of the Oh My God tickets can be mailed out. Step tickets are still at will call, and some other categories of tickets are at will call. But we moved the date for mailing back so that we could actually, a couple of thousand more could get mailed out rather than will call. So I believe the team is reducing that will call, I think, by as much as 50% to make that work more smoothly.
Great. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Now, I hear rumors from, time to
Yeah, the other thing I want to point out is, we've talked a lot about growth and size, and we can't get bigger unless we solve some of these problems. And one of them, particularly the getting into the event, and one of them is related to traffic and people carpooling and using air travel, and then the Burner Express. We started the Burner Express and the car passes that make people crazy in order to really get people to be more conservative about how they arrive. And I know it's hard, but people have to let's get creative. We all need to get creative together in order to be able to grow. And that's going to include not just the gate and the will call, but the participants to take into consideration how they get there. in what form in order to make it easier for us all to arrive at the same time.
Right. Yeah. It's something that I think you kind of a constant theme to go back to is, everyone needs to keep in mind, this is an amazing event and experience, but it also takes some sacrifice in trying to problem solve. And, there are some things that are going to challenge you. And if you have to work harder to figure out how to carpool with your friends so that the event can run more smoothly, then that is what it is. And, there are no problems, only solutions, right? So I think people would just focus more on that.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is a math problem in some ways. Some folks might be filling their cars up and they say, well, it's so full, I can't have another person in it. But I know that many camps use either containers or large trucks or box vans. And I think it's a real exercise in people thinking about how they're bringing themselves to Burning Man. So if you're able to put as much as you can in the truck, then you might have room for 2 or 3 people in your car. And what you guys are bringing is an overnight bag and your food and water because you're meeting the truck there. We really need to have everybody look at that so that we can be able to expand the event.
Great. Now, I hear rumors from time to time about the event potentially getting shut down or relocating. Is there any possibility of Burning Man relocating? I mean, I know you had the lawsuit with Pershing County, Nevada there in 2013 that was settled. And is that something that helps to ensure a long future in Black Rock City?
No, not really. I mean, the problem with the county was a belief that they would also be able to levy fees on us for the same services that we were already paying for with the feds. You can't do that. So we had to work our way through that. And there were some other details to it, but that was the foundation of it. I think the biggest danger right now to Burning Man is the fact that the state of Nevada has levied an entertainment tax. And we still believe that we don't fit under a form of entertainment. We're not, frankly, we're not a Las Vegas show. And we're not a car race or concert in a stadium. So we're not happy about what is basically a 9% tax that's going to happen on every single person's ticket. We're not able to absorb that. We don't have enough breathing room in our budget to do that. So that's the thing that right now makes us look longingly towards Utah or any other state that might not have levied that. That's the thing that's putting us in the most danger at the moment. We have worked with the BLM and to iron out some things from this year.
That's a Bureau of Land Management, correct?
That's the Bureau of Land Management, which is a Department of the Interior entity. Department of Interior, of course, oversees the Park Service too.
Right.
So Bureau of Land Management lands are typically sort of mining and grazing and then open recreation. And we were sort of on opposite side of some issues leading into the summer. And their approach was putting us in a position of costing us another $1 million on top of what it cost us last year. So
they wanted an on-site compound or something with if I recall reading, with Choco Tacos on tap.
Right. Isn't that funny that the reporter, she sure did her work. She got some documents were leaked that had been given to us asking for us to build a separate compound. There is a law enforcement compound outside of the fence, but this would have been another compound. And they already have a living environment in Gerlach, and they have a small living environment outside of the fence, and this would have been a third environment. And it would be a duplication of things that are actually available in the town of Gerlach, like washers and dryers. And it asked for flush toilets and washer and dryers in a remote location. And the cost is for plumbing and water and electricity and a fence, a chain link fence, were really beyond what was reasonable. The other issue that you're pointing to was related to catering and food. And we have a very efficient caterer that takes care of all of the eating needs for the staff. And that's the best one for everybody to be using that would be working the event also. But they got it in their heads that they had a list of food items that they wanted to have provided for them and 24-hour snacks. That took a bit of time, but we've rolled that one back also.
Great. So last year, you guys were what, at about 70,000 or 68,000? Is that correct?
68,000 is the cap for the number of participants, and we did not reach that number last year.
Okay. Now, I saw an article in USA Today, I believe it was a few months back, that indicated you were trying to, and it's something that you mentioned a moment ago, you're interested and open to the idea of expanding. And in this particular article, it said, it threw out the number 100,000 people. I mean, do you foresee any potential of the, population continuing to grow to that size? Because would be a significant increase from where it is now.
Every year, there are more and more people that want tickets. We used to grow every single year. The BLM put a cap on our population. That's not something that we're doing willingly. That's
Gotcha.
Related to a permit process. We would have preferred to continue to grow. We were able to manage it, and we were organically growing between 6 or 8% up to 12 to 15%. There were some years, maybe more than 10 years ago, where we grew more than that. But we were pretty happy, and we have been pretty happy managing a 10 or 12% growth. But a 5-year permit that we were previously under, and the current 5-year permit, the previous one was 50,000 was the top of the whole permit cycle, which was 5 years, and the current top is 70,000. But that was too high or too low, too early on in a 5-year cycle. So we've actually been trying to negotiate making the kind of modifications that are allowed through the permit process. And it's a pretty challenging and kind of costly process for both the BLM and the organization to go through. It still might happen before we're at the end of this cycle, but it takes 2 years to really get this kind of thing started. So we are already working with engineering firms for the next permit cycle, and the engineering firms would go as high as we ask them to. At this point, we have not been doing tests over 100,000, but these are tests that you do with the environment, with queuing, traffic, things like that. And 100,000 is just the next number. We're not sure that if it would be that size, and it certainly would never, ever happen overnight. That's the kind of thing that would have to happen.
Yeah, probably nothing happens overnight in your world, I would assume.
Nothing happens.
Now, you've personally been involved with steering the development of the regional burns around the world, which seem to really be increasing and expanding in recent years. How do regional burns play into the long-term vision for the event?
Well, the long-term vision is to really help the culture happen out in the world beyond Black Rock City. So the burns are the regional burns are the core of that. We're not just focused on the burns. We're certainly focused on doing civic art in towns, and we're definitely focused on encouraging the Burners Without Borders culture. And the regional burns are a place and an opportunity for both of those endeavors to show up and be proof of concept. So doing interactive art at the burns, giving people an opportunity to understand what Burners Without Borders is, and engaging the 10 principles sort of real time and not just sort of philosophically. But anything more than 3 days, a 3-day event, we consider, if it uses the 10 principles, it has the chance to be a transformative experience. And we're running out of space in the Black Rock Desert, so we are doing everything we can. There are 10,000 people in South Africa, and there were 6,000 people in Israel. And the U.S. events, I think, get as high as 2,500 to 3,000. The largest one is in Austin. People can explore our website and learn a lot about what they're doing. There's one in Japan, South Korea, New Zealand. And it's really fabulous to explore the world and see the culture happening, not just in Nevada, but all around the world.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I've been to a couple of regional burns in my area, Los Angeles and San Diego. And of course, above and beyond even the, I guess, sanctioned regional burns, there's been so much inspiration from Burning Man, and that's something that I'm curious about. What do you think of the ever-growing festival culture that is, it's obvious they've been inspired by Burning Man. I mean, there's some differences with, as you mentioned earlier, with vendors and paying acts and so forth. But what are your thoughts on some of these events that obviously are influenced, but not necessarily, applying all 10 principles?
Well, I mean, for me, anything that works towards bringing people together and giving them an opportunity to learn about each other and communicate with each other and treat each other well is a positive and really important thing. The festival culture has definitely grown and matured over the last probably 15 years. And certainly we've seen a lot more micro festivals coming up even in the last 5 years. Some people may think that Burning Man's affected that. I would probably guess that just festival culture in general, and it's been quite flush in Europe and Germany and Holland and England, and maybe you could say it's pretty flush in Australia. It wasn't as flush 25 years ago in the United States at all, and we've got Coachella and Bonnaroo and Burning Man as being events that are all more than 45,000. I don't think there's any others that are over 40, 45,000. Of course, those are 60, 70, 80, 100, depending on which day you're looking at Coachella. And that certainly happens twice. I think it's a really noble endeavor for anybody to want to bring people together in a festival environment. The daytime festivals, your music daytime festivals, they're certainly fun. I don't think that they have the opportunity to really give people a transformative perspective into how they fit and work with others. I think the overnight opportunities are the ones where you go to sleep. You have to be quiet. You wake up. You're carrying your toothbrush down to the showers, and you say hi to people, and someone drops their towel, and you say, "Hey, buddy," instead of just stepping over it.
Right.
And you keep the area outside your tent clean because the guy right next to you keeps the area outside his tent clean, and that's all common courtesy. I think it's really important to encourage festival culture and gatherings and group community endeavors. The world is not, producing fewer people, we're producing more. And it's a very important life skill to engage kindly with others and compassionately. And the festival cultures that are coming in different directions, the lessons that I think people get from Burning Man are deeply related to how you treat other people. And I'm hopeful that more of the overnight festivals are able to give that sort of familial community feeling so that people leave and they go home and they treat each other better, and not just at the festivals.
Absolutely. Now, as you mentioned, Burning Man is an experiment in temporary community, and that's very safe to say. Within the transformational festival community, you hear a lot of talk about, people wanting to step it up a notch and create permanent village infrastructures or eco villages. I'm very curious on what your thoughts or interest level is in that. I mean, has this ever been considered as an avenue to pursue within the Burning Man organization?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, you hear a lot of talk about people saying, wow, this is an amazing event for 3 days, 4 days, in Burning Man's case, a full week. How do we do this long term? How do we, keep these structures set up? How do we stay, and create little villages of people that want to actually dedicate their life, instead of a week, all year long? Is that something that you've, heard much about or ever considered or giving, any consideration to?
Well, sure. So there's a couple of different ways you can look at that. One is I don't think it's practical to actually do what happens at Burning Man, to do that long term. I just don't think it's practical.
Yeah, it would have to be somewhat different, obviously.
Right. So then what is it you're really looking for? Well, I think people are looking to be living amongst others that share their values.
Exactly.
That they're willing to negotiate their needs with together, and that they care for and might look out for. And I think that can be done in different ways. There are definitely people in different parts of the country buying property, sizes from 100 acres to 7,000 acres and more. that's, I would say, is certainly a movement to being able to create governance and rules and connectivity that are productive and happier than you might feel in a town of strangers, in a
Right.
neighborhood where you don't quite know who's across the street, or in a building where someone downstairs makes noise and you've got to call the cops. The behaviors that we typically have in urban and even suburban environments don't take into account the group, because
Yeah.
we're just not setting up those structures. So I think it's a natural outcome of very productive environments like Burning Man. And Burning Man is, I think, very influential in people right now wanting to buy pieces of property, to
For
be able
sure.
to house, 25 people or even 100 people or more. From my standpoint and from the organization standpoint, we're not chasing that dream. That's not what I think is the most productive way to scale the culture. I
Hmm.
think the regionals and the relationships and the conversation around what is Burning Man, what's the culture, and how it can create change using different tools is the purpose for the organization. That doesn't mean that we aren't interested, though, in a center, that physical space that would be dedicated to the contemplation of that
Hmm.
could be dedicated to arts, uh, that could be set as an example of how to engage. But our interests don't currently lie in actually setting up any communities as an experiment. We're more interested in sort of practical, philosophical architecture to encourage it, rather than reproduce it.
Yeah, I would say it's safe to say you've got your hands more than full with what you're doing. So,
Yeah, yeah. I
that,
mean, we're a fan of physical space. Don't get me wrong, and I frankly think that for the long-term survival of the culture, that we are going to need physical space. We're going to need a spot that people can consider, um, a location that uh, honors the long-term survival of the experience. But I don't see that as a place where you would circle it with long-term houses
right.
and chores for the community. I would see it probably more as a center where people could come and go, that it
Mhm.
could have, it'd be more porous, like
Mhm.
Black Rock City is, that it's not exactly the same all the time. I don't really want to build a village with ownership. That doesn't appeal to me. I think we will, as time goes by, find it challenging to only be in the Black Rock Desert. We may need to find a place that would allow for infrastructure, so that we could have a firm grip on what it is we're doing for the longer term, and not just have an office in San Francisco. And I'm certain that it's in our future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of an in between, I think, is where it's transient, where people can come and go. So it's not this ownership, and this is my plot of land, and this is my,
Yeah.
So it allows for a lot of people to have the experience year round. Yet you don't get pigeonholed into this is my yard, stay off of it, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's my theory. Yep.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, you've mentioned a few times, thrown out the word transformational. I mean, do you consider Burning Man to be an event that intends to create a transformational experience for attendees?
Well, we're maintaining it so that it will. It started very naturally and organically, but when you put certain things in place and you keep, for instance, in 1996, there was somebody in the center of camp that sold burgers.
Oh, really?
Right. And in 1997, there was also a little stand that sold water and suntan lotion, and those were allowed, those were permitted, and they happened to have been by the same person. But that was stopped when we realized that that was just opening a can of worms, and it was not going to be a productive. Frankly, some of the things we've done are things that we don't want to maintain. Leave no trace. Who wants to clean up after other people? So
Yeah.
we saw that existed by an organization that teaches people backcountry ethics. And we started using those words, saying, well, you pack it in, you pack it out, which again are backcountry ethics used by the Department of the Interior. So we've been adopting practical ways to keep people connected with each other, looking out for each other, looking out for the land, working together, but being themselves and being creative. We all know that creative, not everybody knows, but my experience has been that creativity and self-expression can be very productive ways to get in touch with who you are. But if you do it sort of all on your own and you just sort of act out, you're just going to end up being a clown. But if you do it in the way it engages with other people and you're creative in who you are and it's the gift of yourself. I think with all the 10 principles together, we've found that produces a transformative environment. So we're stimulating that. We're encouraging it and nurturing it and stimulating it.
Right. Now, as one of the most unique burners of all, what's a perfect day like for Marian on the playa?
Well, there's nothing really unique about me except that I happen to be at the right place at the right time, and I get to oversee this magical event and facilitate it with a group of wonderful, fabulous collaborators. I consider myself an administrator and a super, super lucky person. I'm not a highly costumed person. I'm usually so busy I barely can put a costume on.
Right.
I think one of the most unique things about me is I have a cat car that some people see. It's been on the playa for about 10 years. It's a furry, super furry cat car. And I've got friends that like to drive it around more than I do because it's so cute. People stop it all the time, and then I don't get to go off where I want to be. My perfect Burning Mans have been, I help oversee First Camp, which is sort of it's the ambassadorial White House type location on the playa for the organizers. 5 out of the 6 original founders live there together with a number of the senior leadership for the event and for the organization. And then we invite friends that we've met while we travel and people that we want to camp with us. And I oversee the building of that camp. And that's lately been the most rewarding thing for me, is to host people in my mini environment, our mini camp. But sort of my gift back to my coworkers is to help make them comfortable and make sure that their friends have a spot to camp. And so that's my perfect Burning Man. My perfect Burning Man is to hang out in my camp, meet new people that come to visit, and maybe have a cocktail or two, and hopefully, really get to sit back and enjoy the really unique characteristic of something that I've been part of for 19 years now.
Yeah, wow, that's quite an incredible journey that you've had, and as you said, I guess I don't know if I believe in luck fully, but if there is such a thing, you certainly are lucky. I would say you've created the circumstances for yourself by being who you are, and you've done an amazing job. And this has been really fascinating to have the opportunity to pick your brain and get an idea of what it looks like from the unique seat that you sit in. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And I want to leave you with one short question. It's one I always like to put my guest on the spot and ask. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Marian Goodell?
I'll tell you, I'm stretched by the people that continue to talk about the meaning of life as being love. And I would say that I'm not quite in that same boat, although I think that's a very important thing that we should be finding our heart space for. I do think the meaning of life is to take the opportunities we have to be on this planet at this time and to find ways to engage with other people so that you're working outside of yourself, that you're not self-absorbed, but you're aware of others, and that you might be making their lives a little more enjoyable by the way in which you show up and present yourself in the way that you communicate. I genuinely think that if everybody looked at themselves a little bit differently and how they floated in the world and they imagined beyond their own concerns, I think that that's the purpose. I think that we're all here, whether we haven't really chosen to be here or not, and whether we have a short or long lifespan, giving some purpose to how we engage with other people is a pretty rewarding way to go about it. And I'm certain is part of why my life has been more enjoyable, because Burning Man has certainly put me in that position.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, the theme this year, Carnival of Mirrors, in what you just said, makes me think of a saying that I'm very fond of. Everywhere you go, you're there waiting for you. And if you think about life in those terms as, how can I benefit these other people that I'm bumping up against that are really a reflection of self, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, Brandon, you wanted to ask me about serendipity and some of your feelings about paranormal activity, right?
Yeah. As my listeners know, I'm a big fan of stories of synchronicity, serendipity, or a positive paranormal experience. Do you have a story like that you'd like to share?
I'll tell you, I don't have one story because it happens to me so often. I think the thing about Burning Man that really strikes people, and I'm sure you've had them yourself, is that once you're in a place and a location where everybody's open to chance and serendipity and synchronicity, it happens more often. And
absolutely.
It happens at Burning Man so frequently that it freaks people out. And I think that what I wanted to say was that it can happen outside of Burning Man, but you have to open yourself up to it. And if you sort of listen to your instinct and you're aware, again, of people around you, things like serendipity and synchronicity will absolutely flow, and they're very rewarding. It's very rewarding to feel connected to others, or that you were thinking of someone and the same thing happened, or you were wondering about that blue balloon you had as a child and suddenly one floats in front of you.
Absolutely.
I think that those are really heart-opening experiences. And the only paranormal one I think that I could talk about without going into a lot of detail is that I think what happens when you gather so many people together like you do at Burning Man at one time, you are calling in very positive experience. And the last burn that we usually have at Burning Man on Sunday night has a lot of spiritual energy to it.
The temple burn, yeah.
To the temple burn. And I wouldn't say that I can point to any one thing, but for anybody that's ever sat there and watched that burn happen and felt the fire and the release, must believe that there are spirits beyond ourselves, that they're doing positive things for our lives.
Yeah, the temple burn is truly, it's such an interesting experience because you go from, Saturday night being the burning of the man, which is so celebratory, and, it's like the climax of the event. And then on Sunday evening, you have the temple burn, which is just, so sacred. And you said it well, it's like, you have to acknowledge that there's something beyond ourselves when you feel the energy of that space and all the open hearts, together that, and of course a lot of reflection on loved ones lost and things like that. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful experience. So anyone who hasn't been to Burning Man, I could not encourage you. There's nothing more I could encourage you to do for yourself. Put it on your bucket list. Do it. It is absolutely incredible experience. And Marian, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and for everything that you do. You really have what you and your team there are doing is creating a container for transformation. And I've seen it firsthand, and I've heard countless stories myself from others where, you go to the desert for a week, you come back, and there's just something that shifted in you. And I think the more, and it's a good shift, and the more of that we can, get out there in the world, the better. So
I agree, Brandon. I agree. I encourage people to go to our website where it says regionals.burningman.org and look at the map and find something that's near them and connect. They don't have to go to Black Rock City. They can do it in their own homes. And I hope everybody has a chance to understand what Burning Man is, because it is a really magical way to look at yourself in the world.
Absolutely. Marian, thank you again. And
thanks,
well, everyone, that concludes our episode. Marian, it's been really, really great to have you on the show. This truly has been a dream interview for me to get to speak to the brains behind the scenes of my very favorite event on planet Earth. I really look forward to watching and participating in the next chapters of the Burning Man story. As for all of you out there listening, remember to subscribe to the Positive Head podcast on iTunes and give us a good review while you're at it. Also, check out positivehead.com where we have brand new wares and other really cool stuff for you to check out. Otherwise, until next time, remember, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.